Hey, welcome back here, wrestling fans. We are revisiting the Mania. I'm Carlos,
And I'm Maria.
and this week we had to do something a little bit different because we weren't able to record the WrestleMania 21, give it the full breakdown that we normally do, unfortunately. But
We're here to bring in a moose boosh.
yeah, we're gonna go ahead and give you our thoughts about the Iron Claw movie, coming from a person who's watched wrestling the majority of his life and from a marking training with Maria. Now, Maria,
Yes,
what do you have any facts, tidbits, or things that we need to know before we start off?
I do. So, The Iron Claw is a 2023 movie
Hmm.
written and directed by wrestling fan Sean Durkin. This story, as we all know, or maybe you don't know because you're tuning in to find out what this movie is about a professional wrestling family, the Von Erich family,
Hmm.
and the film features Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, Maura Turney, Harris Dickinson, Holt McCallney, and Lily James.
Okay. Now, this Von Erich family does have a tragic history
It does.
when it comes to wrestling history.
Mhm.
So, fortunately, there's a lot of deaths in this family, and this is pretty much what this movie is portraying. And it's giving you kind of like a Cliff Notes version of this movie, or of the history of the family in this movie.
Right.
So, with this, let's give our initial thoughts of the Iron Claw. Well, why don't you go first?
Well, going into this movie, I know that you were interested in watching it. You
Hmm.
said that the movie was coming out around Christmas time, around December, and you and our friends were surprised because, as you mentioned, this is such a tragic story about a family and sons who passed away in different ways. So I was kind of surprised, one, curious to see like why this was being rolled out during this time, but also I thought, well, this is a movie about a family. So also possibly a good time as people are going to go watch movies with their family. So what do you think?
Yeah, that was my initial, like, stole my thought, but there was one of those things where I had been talking to our friend Raymond, who was on our previous podcast, WrestleMania 20 revisit, that it seemed strange that the people at A24 would decide to release this during the Christmas holiday one. Normally, around the Christmas holiday, we get more upbeat movies, more like family oriented movies. Once in a while, you get like one of those movies. Like, I think either last year or 2 years ago, we got
Was
was
it
it,
Crumpet?
well, not Krampus, that's not the one I was thinking about,
Oh,
but that
okay.
action film with
Die Hard?
Hopper from Stranger
Oh,
Things.
yeah. What is it called?
I'll look it up, but regardless of that, um there was a, kind of a little bit of a doubt
Hmm.
as far as how this movie would fare and how it would portray all of the deaths that befall this family.
Right.
So with that,
Well, going in, the reasons why I wanted to watch this
hmm,
movie are because some of the actors that were in the movie, one being Zac Efron, who I am a fan of. We just saw him in a movie called what is it? The World's Best Beer Run?
the world's greatest beer run
The World's Greatest Beer
on
Run.
Apple TV.
If you haven't watched it, that movie is also loosely based on a real story based on what is it during Vietnam?
Yeah, and there's this guy Chicky that gets the bright idea to go ahead and deliver beers to his friends in the neighborhood that are in Vietnam because you know the younger generation is anti-war, and they're calling, they're having all these protests calling people baby killers, and he's offended by it and upset that his friends are being put in that light and that they're bringing the morale down for them. So he's like, you know what if I bring them beer? So
Yeah, so we watched him in that one, and if you all are interested in hearing or watching us do a revisit on that movie, let us know. But I was interested in watching this movie because Zac Efron was in it. Also watched like one of his cooking shows where he goes traveling across the world into different places, and then of course also a fan of Jeremy Allen White. Is it that's in
Yeah,
the
Jeremy Allen White, who plays the bear, or the lead in on the FX show The Bear. So he was also in the American version of Shameless.
hmm And that show, well, The Bear just won Emmys
Hmm.
just recently. So that's another good show that we definitely recommend you watch. Definitely covers in a lot of heavy topics, just like this movie. Both are excellent actors. Have you heard of the other actors that were in this movie? Or
The only other actor I knew was Maura Tierney. Now, Maura Tierney was News Radio,
yes,
and
which is a comedy, right?
yeah, it's a comedy show that aired on NBC.
hmm
I also She's been like in other like actual serious ones, but I've never watched those. And the only thing I remember her, like, because I can't remember the other movie she's been, but she does movies too,
Right.
is that she was in the movie Semi Pro.
Oh,
She plays the
what?
love interest of Woody Harrelson's character.
Yes, I
Uh,
forgot. Oh, wow, that's a good callback. I totally forgot that she was in that movie, but Semi Pro is another one of those classic movies that we'd also recommend that you watch. So with that,
yeah, let's get into the things we did like about the Iron Claw movie.
okay.
You can go first.
Okay, so what did I like about this movie? There were at least that I can point out, my top 3 things. One that we're covering a wrestling family. I love to hear and watch wrestling families as they go through, from father to son to now grandson. And that's what we're finding in this movie is that although it is a tragic story, there is that light at the end of the tunnel because these wrestlers, this family, their legacy lives on, and their grandchildren are still wrestling to this day. So that's my one is that I was interested in like watching the wrestling, seeing how this family developed, seeing how the reason why they're wrestling. So
Hmm.
that's my top. And then the second thing that I really enjoyed about this movie is the love that was shared with the brothers.
Okay.
Of course, you see some family rivalry, which I think you see that dynamic in a lot of families. I'm an only child. So to me, I'm coming at this from like an only child perspective. And I love being an only child. And no, I'm not spoiled. Maybe spoiled with like love, affection. But I love to see that dynamic with the brothers. I have a total of my father growing up. So it was him, his 3 brothers, grew up with my 2 cousins, that are twins, and then my other 2 cousins that are also boys. So I've just always grown up around, these larger than life personalities. And that was another thing that I loved about this movie as well as my mother's brothers, again, larger than life personalities. Uh, I've I've had the I don't know if it's a good word to say is like the honor. But I've always had a lot of good things with either my cousins or my uncles or the men that have been in my life. So I like that.
Hmm.
And then the third thing is that we also see that even though you're growing up in a family, it shows that you could have the same parents, you can live in the same house, but you can have a different experience from your sibling. So it's important to see that dynamic because just because you grew up in the same house with the same parents, the same siblings, the way that you grow up is different. The way that you take things is different. So that's why I also like this movie. What about you?
Well, for me, I do kind of like the cast, and let's show the picture here of the is one of the younger brothers that they have here. That I think ends up being like a combination of the two
Mhm.
younger brothers, because there is another brother who is named Chris that is not actually pictured there, and I'll get that a little bit later on about like the things that things that we didn't like about the Iron Claw movie. Now, this movie, I did enjoy the music, especially if you like managed to see the little teaser that I put out like on Instagram or on Facebook. When I announced that we were going to be dropping our movie review, I added the Rush song,
Mm.
the Tom Sawyer, and Tom Sawyer is one of those songs that Kerryvonerich actually used as an entrance theme when he was in his father's wrestling promotion, World Class Championship Wrestling.
Right.
So it was kind of like fun to actually be able to see that, in particular, as far as when Kerry comes back from failing to get to the Olympics, and he has to come back, and he's like, "Yeah, I guess I'm gonna be joining the family business of being a wrestler." And they start a training montage, and it's to that particular song. So that's one thing that I like, that they were able to incorporate something that was also part of the Von Erich family lore, I guess you can say. And for those that didn't know, and plus, it's a pretty cool song anyway. So whenever you can use a Rush song in a movie, I think it's a win-win situation.
Mm.
Number two, what I did like also is the wrestling, and some of these matches that they show here in particular are ones that I actually want to go back and find.
Mhm.
There are a couple that they show here that unfortunately I was not able to like pinpoint. I'm still researching as far as like what matches are shown. I have to be able to get like the home edition, or the home, like the digital, or when it comes to streaming,
Mhm.
unless I manage to get away.
But what tidbits we did find, we've
Yeah.
added to our companion watch list for the Iron Claw. So after you're done watching this, go take a look at that playlist
Mhm.
and skip through some real interviews of Kevin, his sons, and some tidbits about the movie.
Yeah, but the match that I did find, because the library of World Class Championship Wrestling,
Mm.
which is the father's Fritzvonerich's promotion, is available on Peacock, because the library was bought out by Vince McMahon. So if you want to see for sure one particular match of this, it's the match that Kerry has during the Kevin Von Erich Invitational, um, or memorial. Excuse me. It's the memorial that they had. It's a event that they have to memorize, to in Kevin's memory, after he tragically passes away
Mhm.
in February of 1984 due to some enteritis inflammation, is what ends up being. But there's always conflicting evidence that he might have been using certain illegal substances that
Okay.
might have led to that.
So it's your second.
Yeah, so that match of Ric Flair versus Kerry Von Erich,
Mhm.
who ends up winning a coin toss. That is actually factually correct. That he wins a coin toss between Kerry and Kevin, because they both feel that they have the right to face Ric Flair. And Kerry ends up winning the coin toss, and he faces Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. So that match is available for you to see on Peacock if you want to. Just like me, like if you had not watched that match, and that's what I like about this particular movie, is that they portray some of these matches, And not only did it get me interested uh, to find it, but I'm like wanting to actually go through some of those matches on World Class Championship Wrestling, because in our previous episode with Raymond, he actually brought up a couple of superstars that end up transitioning to the WWE later on in their careers that Maria is interested in. One is Stunning Steve Austin, and the other one is Big Red, or as he's known now, the Undertaker.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into watching those matches
Hmm.
with the Undertaker before he was.
Yeah, so that if you're interested in looking that up, that's available on Peacock. Like I said, Kerry versus Ric Flair. It's in, you just search World Class or World Class Championship Wrestling. It's in May of 1984.
Yeah.
So with
While we were researching this, an interesting thing that I found out is that during the movie, they show a scene where Kevin gives the claw to Ric Flair
hmm
and he ends up bleeding.
hmm
And with this movie, for those of you that are like diehard fans, if you've watched it or if you plan to watch it, some is truth, some is a little stretched, some is what is it? What's the word?
exaggerated
A little bit
or
exaggerated
fabricated to make the story better.
to make
But let's we'll get to that when it comes to things we didn't like about the
right.
movie.
But what I was gonna say is that that is actually an event that did happen.
Hmm.
So he did give him the claw like that, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yep.
Well, but I was getting back to the point of enjoying the wrestling, because what I also read is that Chavo Guerrero
Hmm.
Jr. You may know him from the latest WrestleManias that we've been seeing. Nephew of Eddie Guerrero, the late Eddie Guerrero, rest in peace, Eddie. But he has been making a name of himself, or for himself,
Right.
for coordinating some of these matches. And what he did, so he did in a recent interview, is say that normally Hollywood has been just filming like certain set pieces,
Hmm.
but what they actually did here is they actually coordinated actual full matches
Hmm.
for each of these ones that are featured in this movie. And then the director and the editor just ended up taking the best scenes and cutting them together.
Yeah, and they filmed them in front of an audience too, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
So now I'm interested to see if we'll. I kind of really want to see how they did that match. Like all of those matches featured, I'm hoping that we get like some type of behind the scenes or director's cut or something like that, in particular. And I think the third thing I would say that there was something else that I did like is that it was at the end they end up making like, through all the tragedy they end up finding like a silver lining type of thing. It's as much as it is like a very kind of grim movie full of tragedies and things like that. There is like a warm heart, like there is like heart to the story, and like Maria mentioned, we did have our doubts because of this movie coming out and because of the history of the Von Erich family. uh, I was like, this, no way, this could be a very like feel good movie, or a heartwarming movie. And these guys managed to do it. Like
Hmm.
Sharon Durkin and A24 managed to make a great film, a great family film. Um, and there were like moments where I almost teared up.
Hmm.
There was actually moments when I heard my wife tearing up. Not
Hmm.
to put you on the spot, babe.
I was.
And other people behind us were so it's a great movie. If you are prone to like those type of movies that might make you cry,
Bring your
bring a
tissues.
tissue. So, or if you don't want to cry out in public, wait for it to come out on a home video, either through digitally, or if you buy the Blu-ray, and just make sure you watch it alone, I guess.
A good cry is
Yeah.
cathartic. So with that, like Carlos said, it was definitely a tearjerker movie. And when we watched it, we're like, well, how do you put together a movie that is not only the actors, did a great job, one showing what wrestling is as far as what it takes
Mm-hmm.
to wrestle. You have to put in that time, you have to put in that commitment, and it's definitely wear and tear, not only in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
but also in your body. And we get to see the strength training that they're doing, what it takes to not only be just like a regular wrestler, but if you want to make it to the top, what that takes. It takes commitment. Also, we get to see the dynamic with their father, and how they're trying to, like, I guess, make their father proud.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that it's very relatable. This movie is relatable to not only, like, just your everyday person, because we all go through those things where it's like, oh, maybe you want to make your mother or father proud, but what's the cost of that? And you
Yeah.
kind of get to see what the cost of that is in this movie when you have parents that are either pushing, or they just happen to get pushed because your child is like, well, I want to make my parents proud, I want to do this. But then you kind of get to see the cost of this. One thing I will say is that Kevin did say that his father was nicer,
Mm-hmm.
than he was portrayed, but you had a good point to that.
Well, with that one, it's no one wants to like believe that their parents are like very evil, I guess you could say.
But you also said that you need to have like a
Yeah,
villain.
you do also need to have a villain, in particular in movies, to drive the story forward. Just like in wrestling psychology, where you need like a
Heel.
heel and a baby face, you need to have some type of reason. And what this will transition into things we didn't like about the Iron Claw movie.
Ooh.
In particular, since I'm already talking, I'll go ahead and go first. The portrayal of Fritz von Erich, like Maria mentioned, is one thing that we didn't like. I understand, like we're saying that we needed a villain and we needed to kind of like have someone to point the finger, not only as the audience, but also as, I guess, as a storyteller, um, to this, because it mainly focuses on Kevin, since he's the only sole surviving brother that still remains. Everything's from his point of view, and since they already started producing and doing all the like screenwriting and everything, they when they started doing this A24, they did not consult with Kevin Von Erich.
Mhm.
So the only way that Kevin found out that this movie was being made was his daughter had seen it on the internet and approached him about it. So right off the bat, that's one thing that I didn't like,
Mhm.
for that particular reason, because he did not get to have that much input. Because by the time he did get some input, by the time he got to sit down and talk with Sean and the other people at A24, it was probably too late for them to make any moves, so changes or edits or anything like that. So he just told them, it was like, hey, just portray our family as a uh, as we were. We were brothers and we loved each other, and
And
that's, as long as you get that, I'll be okay. So with that, the second thing we'll get to, and I'm probably going to steal some of your thunder here on this one, but it's something that's pretty much well known here.
what is?
They do have Ric Flair in this
Oh
video,
yeah.
in this movie. The actor's name that they got here is Aaron Dean Eisenberg, and he does not have like a lot of like major film credits. He does appear like in shows like Law and Order and what's the other one? Uh, I forget. CSI, I think, is another one from what I've seen in his film credits. So I'm sure he was very excited to get on a movie with this type of cast, and unfortunately, his performance as Ric Flair, and I
I
know
think it's just
it's
casting.
yeah,
Like he wasn't the right fit for Ric Flair.
no, for Ric Flair, you need to get into that mindset. You even Ric Flair like gets into that mindset, and unfortunately, like when he gets into his character, he may go a little bit too far. And just like recently, like maybe about a month ago, during when Ric Flair was cutting a promo,
Mm-hmm.
he was still in his, Ric Flair, I'm the man, wouldn't want
Right?
to sleep with me.
Yeah.
So he was like, women's 18 to 25, please find me in my hotel. If you're 25 and like 30, don't bother or something like that.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so he pretty much got canceled on the internet. But that's the kind of mindset that you have to have, because Ric Flair, even now that he's like in his 60s,
Right.
still has that mentality that I'm the
Yeah.
man. And
Still has
like,
that Ric Flair drip.
yeah, so
To be the man, you gotta beat the
yeah,
man.
that's just,
So
so that's one thing. That's another thing I didn't like about this movie. Um, and the third thing you could say that I did not like of the movie is, even though the runtime is 2 hours and 12 minutes, I would not have minded if they had actually gone a little bit over,
Mhm.
because once the tragedies start falling upon his family, you lose track of time of where they were. So like David ends up passing like in 1984, February 1984,
Mhm.
and then during that particular after that tragedy, Fritz decides to have a memorial. Like I mentioned earlier, they had that memorial event in May, and Fritz actually comes back from retirement to participate in that particular memorial event. He
Mhm.
captures the trios, or the six-man tag titles, that are there with Kevin and newcomer Mike, the brother that I mentioned, is kind of like in a combined character, because the Von Erichs did have another brother named Chris,
Right.
and Chris was the younger brother, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
but he was not as athletically gifted as the other ones. He was not as taller. He had issues with asthma, and because of medications that he was taking, he had brittle bones. So in this particular scene, once Mike starts wrestling for the company after David passes away in the movie,
Right.
there is a moment where Mike gets injured. Remember, he does like a drop kick or lands awkwardly,
Mhm.
and that's actually something that happened to Chris,
Right.
because he was so vulnerable to broken bones. Chris is one that actually broke his arm during a routine like move like that, like a drop kick. And
What a story
yeah,
too.
and with Mike, like we don't like we do see what happens to him, like after this injury that I just mentioned.
Mhm.
He has to go to the hospital, and they operate on him, and then they tell him that they had to put him. The doctors tell Kevin and Fritz that they had to put him in a coma because he had a bad reaction. And what actually happened is they're actually wrestling in Israel or Palestine during this time when Mike actually gets that injury, and he gets toxic shock syndrome while he's
He
abroad.
had a temperature of like over 105
Right.
degrees.
And then they ended up bringing him back. And then
He was just not the same after that happened
yeah,
to
that
him.
was you know that was 1985, I believe,
Mhm.
too. So it's crazy timeline with that, and and then he takes his own life by overdosing on sleeping pills in 1987. Chris also does that, and I think they combined those two brothers into the character of Mike in this movie. And then Kerry Von Erich, with this one, that whole issue with this one that I have is that you know, he does win the title from Ric Flair in 1985. Spoiler alert. But he ends up giving it back like in 14 days later. Um, In the movie, they portray him pretty much like having that bicycle accident, like the same day that he wins that title from Ric Flair,
Right.
and that's something I didn't like. But besides that,
But that did happen.
no, it
So
did
yeah,
happen,
so
but
it's
it
like
didn't happen like the way the movie cuts it. It makes it
right,
seem like it was that same night after he won that title from Ric
right.
Flair that he went out and he got into a
And then
motorcycle
to my
accident.
understanding, when he was part of the WWF was
Hmm.
after that incident, right?
Oh, it's way after because he wins the title in 1985.
Hmm.
Throughout the years, like after like the deaths of Mike and David, um, the company is going down.
Right.
So he ends up selling, Fritz ends up selling or their shares, the Von
Hmm.
Erich shares of World Class Championship Wrestling to Jim Crockett Promotions.
Right.
So when Jim Crockett takes it over, it's known as USWA.
Hmm.
And then that's when that's in 1989, and at that point, that's when Kerry's working on transitioning or going to the big stage, which is WWF, when he
Right.
comes in as Texas Tornado.
So I think that that whole story about the what is it again? The what is not the theater, but the stadium called?
The Sportatorium.
Yeah, I think the Sportatorium could be like a whole series unto itself, similar to like Heels, where you see these different factions of wrestling fighting to be the best, fighting to get to the top,
Yeah.
and going national, going worldwide.
Hmm.
So that was also very interesting to me. The Sportatorium is no more,
Hmm.
demolished in 2003.
Ooh.
So did you have any other things that were your
No.
favorite?
What about you?
I think we're on the same page. I also agree that, well, the director said that they just couldn't have like one more tragedy in this already tragic story. And to me, I think it's not the full story because there were five brothers. So why? And I understand that the other brothers were older, maybe closer, and that their other brother was younger. I hear all that, but I'm like, the complete story is a story of all the brothers.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one of the things that I was bothered with. I'm like, they should have at least had some kind of something about that brother in their story. And then the other item was that there was not enough wrestling for me. I
Hmm.
would have liked to have seen just a little bit more wrestling. We see some, we hear about Chavo is it training them, having them do matches. They're doing live matches in front of audiences. Like, oh, that's awesome. But I would have liked to have seen like more matches than just like a Ric Flair versus.
Hmm.
So that was like my second thing. And then I think the third thing was maybe more of the story of the mother in the movie being fleshed
Hmm.
out. Parents, mother, myself, and parents, their family. One loss, is takes your breath away and takes the life out of you. So after having to deal with that, son after son after son, I just don't understand. Like, how do you get up? How do you move? Like, how do you live after all of that tragedy
Right.
happens? Because, one person gone from your life is so much, but then to see your sons go before you or your children before you, like, that's the ultimate. That's the worst. So I would have liked to have seen her story fleshed out a little bit more um than what they had her in the movie.
Yeah, you brought up a good point because you cast Maura Tierney and she's like a longtime veteran. And like I mentioned, she does do like some drama, like not only television shows, but at movies too.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw her in, like, I didn't like look into the cast besides in the beginning that I knew Zac Efron and
Hmm.
Jeremy Allen White were in it.
Right,
So when I saw her, I was surprised and I was expecting more of her just because I know of her acting background.
right.
So, like you, yeah, I forgot all about that. Thank you for bringing up that point. That I was disappointed that Maura Tierney was not used more in this movie.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so those are my
those are your
those
points.
are my
All
points.
right, and with that, we'll start getting into the final part here. Do we recommend that you watch the movie? Maria?
I do. I think this is definitely a good story that tells you and gives you some insight, not only to what being a wrestler is, living the life of a wrestler, the lifestyle, the pain that you have to endure, what happens when you have injuries. We hear about all the things that they're going through, all the things that their body is going through. And it's not just then, it's the after, because they're still dealing with what their ailments, broken bones, fracture, this, just different things. And so I definitely recommend that you watch this movie. Also, a story of a family that goes through heartbreaking after heartbreaking situation, and the light at the end of the tunnel for this movie for me is and was a very heartwarming scene for Kevin as well, is when his brothers all reunite, which is like, the hope that you have is that at at the end of times you get to revisit with the ones that you love the most. So
Yeah. So as for me, I do recommend that you watch it. As much as I want to nitpick at this movie, and that's just me because being a longtime wrestling fan, like I wasn't familiar like maybe other people, uh, hardcore wrestling fans such as myself, um, that knew the family more, but I knew of them. And when Maria and I were done with this movie, I was like telling her there was another brother, and they never mentioned him. So it drove me crazy, and I had to look it up, just because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't misremembering anything.
right.
And so, and also because in this movie they do not actually show you kerryvonerich's family, because Kerry does end up getting married, and he
Yeah.
has a daughter that actually wrestles. I believe she stopped wrestling, but
Oh,
her Lacey Von Erich actually is Kerry Von Erich's daughter. So it would have been nice. I know Kevin's still alive, and that's, we have to follow a character that's still alive. We have to have kind of like a narrator for this
mhm.
movie. And as much as I want to nitpick at this movie, I still recommend that people go watch this as a wrestling fan.
Right.
Whether you are familiar with the story of the Von Erichs and whether you're not, you still are entertained. You still are, like committed. You're made to be part of the story, and it pays off at the end. So I definitely recommend that you guys go out there if you haven't already. If we're the ones that are convincing you, thank you very much for coming by and watching our movie review of The Iron Claw
Thank you for listening.
and listening for us, because we're also uploading this on the on all the major podcast audio platforms. But recommend that you go watch this movie. Please go out there so we can get more type of movies like this.
Yeah.
That's the only way that either A24 or another studio in Hollywood will you know, go out and reach out to other wrestling families that have such storied history.
There's stories to be told,
Yeah, just
just
like,
like the Marvel and DC
yeah,
universe.
there's
We have.
there's there's lots of things that need to be told. I'm sorry to cut you off
It's
there,
okay.
but like you could like Chavo's already said that the A24s approached him about doing a movie about the Guerrero family. I would love to see more about that.
Yes.
Cody Rhodes says in his entrance to his theme song when he's walking out that there is more than one royal family in wrestling,
Oh yeah.
and there are many families. We could still get the Hearts,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, the Guerreros. I know that they're working on a documentary for Vince on Netflix, so that should be out shortly.
The Usos.
The
Rock
Usos, the Anoa'i
and Hawaii.
family. So there's lots of things. I would actually, like my wife mentioned, I would actually like to see a TV series based on the territories.
Yes.
I was not like one of those people that was blessed enough to have a family that could afford cable. So I wasn't able to see any of the wrestling like World Class Championship Wrestling growing
Hmm.
up. I had to go out and look at it. AWA with Vern Gagne up in Minnesota. there's some Stampede Wrestling in Canada, and there's so many of these families that had their own wrestling territory because that was the dream back then. You became a wrestler, you got enough money, and since you worked in the business, you could probably get into a territory, own a territory,
Mhm.
and then you joined the National Wrestling Alliance, which is the NWA, and they had like little hubs everywhere,
Mhm.
and that's how you got like stars to show up, like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and Dusty Rhodes and other superstars like that because you were part of the National Wrestling Alliance. So I would definitely enjoy seeing more like this.
Right.
If you're a wrestling fan like me,
Mhm.
and if you're like a mark in training like my wife, please go out there, support this movie, and let them know with your pocketbook that you want more things like this made. And also, if you're watching this and you want to see more of these little takes from us, whether it's a wrestling movie or a mainstream movie or a TV show like that, please uh, drop us a line on the comments, give us a like, share with your friends. If you have any questions, if you don't want to comment or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah.
You shoot us an email, revisitingmania@gmail.com. Our next episode will be WrestleMania 21. We'll be breaking that down and revisiting that for you guys. As always, don't forget to subscribe. And we're on all major audio platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google, which if you do Google Music, it's a fun feature because
Yeah, I like it.
you get to not only see this video, but if you
Don't want to watch us.
don't want to watch this,
Or
you
maybe
can
you're at work and you
yeah,
want to listen.
yeah, you want to save your data, you can just switch to the audio and they'll seamlessly keep playing. So also make yourself a little bit more productive because then you can just turn out lock your phone and just listen to the audio stream.
That's true.
So thank you very much for joining us today and have a great night.